What's up, guys? Welcome back. 2026. It is the Friday episode. We are joined today by the entire crew, Mark, Eric, and James. In today's pod, we started off with a review of a video that went viral on Unemployable late last year, where we talked about the housing crisis in Australia. We had the Shadow Minister for Housing on the show, who got absolutely ravaged in the comments. We deep dived into, was the senator right? Is immigration the major, not the major problem with housing affordability in Australia or not? We then moved on to a billionaire tax that is being proposed in California. We talk about the huge names in business that have left California at a moment's notice on the proposal of a 5% of your estate being stolen from you through a one-time tax. Trust me, bro, only one time. We talk about the impacts of that. And then we also had the 2026 predictions from each of us on the panel. What's going to happen this year in real estate, in stock market, in hard assets like gold and silver, and much more. And at the end, unexpectedly, we just riffed for about 15 minutes around big changes that we made, or I made, over the break in my own social media, and how the boys are going to be growing their own personal brands in 2026, taking into account the changes that I've learned after surpassing 100,000 followers on Instagram last year. So it's a pretty interesting pod. I hope you enjoy it. Welcome to 2026. As always, if you don't already subscribe to the channel, please do, and drop a comment, get involved in the conversation. Let's get into it. So guys, I don't know about you, but it's 2026 and it feels like the news cycle has only accelerated. How crazy has it been just over the last week or two in the news cycle? Like what's got your attention to start this year before we jump into today's agenda?
Where do you want to start, mate? More has happened in 12 days than, like when the presidents come in and say, well, I've done more in my first 100 days than what the last president done in 4 years. Well, you've got Venezuela's been taken over. You've got the president of the Fed that's under indictment. You've got Iran going through a revolution. What else has happened? Is there anything onshore? Is there anything in Australia?
It's wild. Well, One Nation is now drawn equal with the Liberal Party in the polls. It's just wild what's going on at the moment. It's just out of control.
I've got a theory on this, just quickly. I don't want to blabber on, but I've got a theory, and I believe that you're seeing a lot of this. Like, who's still talking about Venezuela? No one.
Yeah.
Right. In a day or two, no one's going to be talking about Powell under indictment. I think that you're seeing this ambush at the moment because the administration understands acutely that something stays in the media for 1 or 2 days and then it's gone. And so they're going to try and get everything within their agenda and hit it as quickly as possible, because I think we're in that phase at the moment where things just don't last in the news cycle. Yeah.
Was anybody else like shocked when like all of a sudden Venezuela's the top story, but did anybody else know how much oil Venezuela had before this story? Or was
oil, gold, and Bitcoin?
But just a quick show of hands. Did you know, Mark, that Venezuela had that much oil, like more than the UAE? You did.
Yeah.
See, I didn't.
Yeah.
For 75% of this panel, and we're like in the media creating podcasts, did not know that Venezuela had that much oil. Like we always thought it was just the Middle East, I assume, right, guys, that had all the oil.
Yeah, correct.
And it just shows you how we have these massive blind spots that sometimes just take something like this to realize how much your attention is just taken wherever people want, that it's not actually that's gone back.
If you stop with the emotion and the thoughts and feelings and opinions of it all, and you just follow the money, the oil, and the petrodollar trail, everything leads back to that.
Yeah. You know, it's funny how much I didn't realize how much oil Venezuela had is as soon as it was happening and the news came in, Jen started sending me some stuff, about, the reason why he went in. And I'm like, I said to her, I was like, before I started doing my research, I'm like, here we go. All the conspiracy theorists coming out now, right? Because you sent me a couple of things on Instagram. And then I started doing some research and I'm like, yeah, it's about the oil.
Yeah. And then Topher did a good take on Topher Field did a good take on it. And before the mainstream media gets involved and calls America the oil hungry pigs and all this sort of stuff, you see the actual locals actually rejoicing that they're under dictator regime, and one of the female political influencers saying, I'd rather Trump have our oil than Iran, China, or anyone else that came from it before, which no one even heard about. And now he's got it. the mainstream media is all pissed off, calling it oil monger, and it's like, well, someone's going to get it.
It just shows you, doesn't it, James, the deep injustice. Like, you think about that conversation that we talked about last year with the Emirati who said, we feel loved as a people in the Middle East, and our rulers have our best interests at heart, and the wealth is shared to some degree. And you look at Venezuela, it's just been a country that struggled. The people have struggled for years and years and years. Yet meanwhile, they have this enormous resource and asset. And I got a lot of DMs of people saying, memes being sent to be saying, Trump, if you're looking for the next country to take over with a bunch of resources that's being mismanaged, Australia's right here. Come on down.
It's quite funny, James, to your point. If you look at all these countries that basically America's trying to starve of oil, right? Like, so they're trying to anyway, let's not go into it, but it's like Iran, Russia, China, all these Venezuela. They're the same countries that have banned X, right? And then underneath it, you've got the countries trying to ban X, which is the UK, Canada, and Australia. And it's like, what side are we on, people? We on the side of the commies, or are we on the side of the
go ahead.
The resistance?
That's another huge story, right? Australia and the UK and Canada banding together to ban X. I mean, it's just wild. And they're saying, we're putting Elon Musk on notice. And you're like, no, you're not. You're putting free speech on notice. It's not Elon Musk. It's absolutely wild where else is heading. But
this is a 2-day property development event in March on the 7th and 8th at the Mondrian, the newest luxury hotel here in Burleigh Heads on the Gold Coast. You'll see how developments are found, how they are funded, and how they are actually delivered. But don't ask us if it's worth it. Check out the people who've already been doing it.
Have you got any partnerships from here?
Yeah, absolutely. We are JVing with a weapon from Melbourne and building a really awesome relationship with him.
As usual, all the Unemployable events are fantastic.
It's just amazing. The community's great.
My mind is a bit blown by the end of the day. Lots of information, and it's been awesome talking to everybody else.
I've just put in an offer today, first offer. It's good to take that first step. We'll see where it lands. I think it could be a pretty good deal.
A lot of people I've done business with in the past, I found that they've overpromised and underdelivered, and I feel it's the opposite with Unemployable.
I had a really, really good time, great connections, met some awesome people.
They're getting me in the room, like with people who can help me and in making introductions.
Everyone's just on the same playing field, and everyone's out there just to help each other and have a bit of a conversation.
Got so many connections, and I'm happy to be part of Unemployable.
It's hard to put into words what happens when you get yourself in a room with like-minded people. You just walk on, you can feel the energy, you can feel the momentum. Everyone I spoke to today just had the biggest dreams, the biggest vision. It's so inspiring.
Some of those people that you've just seen have made offers. Some have found partners. Some are actually doing real deals right now. And they all say the same thing. I'm glad I went. If development is on your mind, this is the weekend. You need to stop waiting. Click on the link below and let's start developing together.
Let's jump into the first story on the agenda. Otherwise, we're just going to get sidetracked. And just to frame this up, I want to do a review of a podcast that we released late last year with the Shadow Minister for Housing, Andrew Bragg. I just want to get your thoughts on it. And I'm going to play a reel that went viral from that. But before I play the clip and then we discuss it and get the quick round table from you, because I think this is one of the biggest issues on Australian minds at the moment. I went into AI this morning and I just asked it, what are the impacts? Just to sort of frame how important this role of shadow housing minister is, right? Because I think we pretty much agree that the current minister for housing is not doing a good enough job with keeping houses affordable in Australia. And so we had the shadow minister, the guy that's supposed to hold this guy accountable, that basically just towed the party line for Labor, who he's supposed to be against. But I'll just read this to you because I asked ChatGPT, I said, what are the impacts of when housing affordability becomes an issue in a country, any country? I didn't say Australia, when young people can no longer afford a house. And I want to read this to you because it was very interesting. It wasn't colored for Australia. It was just a general response. So this is a deep question and the damage is real, cumulative, and mostly irreversible once it sets in. I'll keep it structured and blunt. The first thing that breaks is the social contract. Most modern countries run on an implicit deal: work, save, buy a home, raise a family, stability, loyalty to the system. When housing becomes unattainable for an entire generation, that deal is visibly broken. Young people stop believing effort leads to security, and trust in institutions collapses quietly at first and then loudly. This isn't abstract. Its belief in fairness is the glue of a nation. The family formation collapses and it never fully recovers. Unaffordable housing leads directly to later marriages, fewer children, more single-person households, multi-generational living by necessity, not choice. And demographically, fertility drops below replacement, population ages rapidly, and dependency ratios explode. Once fertility falls below 1.6, history shows it is extremely hard to reverse. Look at Japan, Korea, and parts of Europe. And then we have the permanent renter and underclass that emerges. You get a bifurcated society. Owners get asset inflation, political influence, tax advantages, and stability, whereas non-owners get rent extraction, no compounding, geographic immobility, and chronic insecurity. Over time, rent becomes a private tax. Wealth transfer flows upwards every month and class mobility freezes. This is how neo-feudalism forms quietly, legally, and politely. I know this is long, guys, but this is really interesting framing. So I'll just finish this. Productivity and risk-taking fall. When housing is insecure, people avoid job risk, entrepreneurship drops, mobility declines because people can't move cities easily, and workers cling to safe but unproductive roles. Ironically, the very policies that protect housing values reduce long-term economic growth. Countries age stagnant and financialize instead of innovating. And then it talks about political radicalness, which I won't go into. It basically says that the young people become disillusioned. They act on the extremes. They have a burn it down mentality. There is the decline of centre politics and institutional gridlock. This is exactly what we're seeing right now in this country, in Australia. And then we have cultural shifts building and immigration ambitions. And it says here, the most dangerous long-term effect is that skilled mobile young people leave. The brain drain accelerates, tax base erodes, and remaining population skews older and poorer. This creates a feedback loop of fewer workers, higher taxes, worse affordability, and more leave. It goes on and on. So this is a major, major problem, right? When housing affordability runs away from us. And we had, as I said, the shadow minister on. I'm going to play you this one clip where we pressed him. In the US, we saw Trump recently announce, and Jerome, you can throw up the story here. I know this is a bit of a long weave here, guys, but this is from The Hill. The headline is the Trump is right. Ban big investors. So basically, Trump has proposed banning institutional investors from buying single-family homes in America. And it says here, President Trump this week took to social media to signal a shift in the national conversation about housing, announcing plans to ban big investors from buying single-family homes. And it's about time. At the peak of the pandemic, almost 5% of homes were being purchased by institutional buyers in cities like Atlanta, Jacksonville, Tampa, Charlotte, and institutional investors were up to 15% or more of rental homes. And this is what Trump's doing. He's basically saying, we're going to take institutional buyers out of the marketplace. Meanwhile, our shadow minister here in Australia is going to play the clip, and then I'm going to ask for your feedback on what you thought of this. So this is when I pressed him about the housing crisis. Loaded one. All right, mate.
There's so much on this.
There is so much on this. I'll play the clip so that we can go. Just go.
The average Aussie punter sitting at home right now, hearing someone say, no, immigration's not a problem when it comes to a housing crisis. How is that the case?
Well, I don't agree with what you said. And the answer is that if you reduce migration, you will have an impact on the demand side. It is one of the inputs, but it is not true to say, and it's actually quite dangerous for people to assert that if you can just cut migration, you'll solve the housing crisis. It's just not true.
I'm not saying solve, I'm saying reduce. If you've got 500,000 less people to put roofs over their head.
It's a demand side. It will have an impact on the demand side. So it should be part of the mix. But I think we've got to be honest with people and tell them that we have not built enough houses in this country. We don't have enough houses. If you look at the OECD data, we have fewer houses than we need to house our population. So politics is not just about kind of lowest common denominator stuff, right? I mean, it's easy for people to make these kind of connections. It is one factor, but it is not the only factor.
I get that, but hang on. You're saying you're building How many houses are getting built a year in Australia?
170,000 under Labor. It used to be 200,000, as many as 220,000 in 2017.
Okay, 170, 200,
Right.
220, whatever. But we're bringing in
Big
500,000. Yeah, it is. Okay, it is. But it's still only half already of what we're bringing in new. And so I just don't get this thing where you say, well, it's an input. It's a big input. 1 million people in 2 years is, 3/4 of Adelaide with hospitals and buses and all this infrastructure that would need to be built for a city like that. I just don't understand how that gets dismissed as, well, it's an input. It's a major, major problem. Just thinking it's the average Aussie.
So, guys, we looked at the comments, and our audience it was unequivocal, just totally disagreed with Andrew. But Mark, you look like you're itching.
Where do we start?
Just before you go with that, because I just jumped onto a recent podcast with Simon Christomarco, who's one of Australia's leading demographers, and he also agreed immigration isn't the biggest lever at all. So it was interesting to take his to get a read on his rationale behind it, and that
what was it?
It isn't completely screwed. Bottlenecks like red tape is one of the majors. But then I also went on a little.
That's one of the top. Supply is one of the top two, depending on where.
Correct, and then red tape, and then the knock-on effect, and then skill shortage, and all that sort of stuff like that. So I think Mark, you can roll from here. He's probably got more data than all of us.
Where do we want to start, right? So on one day, Trump says institutions can't buy investment homes or housing, and then the next day he tells Fannie and Freddie to go and purchase $200 billion of mortgage-backed securities. So when you buy mortgage-backed securities, you bring the interest rate down, you make housing more affordable, so the average person can purchase more housing, right? You make it more affordable, but then you increase the demand, you push the price up of housing because more people can afford it. Depending on, we've been talking about housing unaffordability or housing affordability for 40 years in Australia. If you go back and look at the news headlines, this has always been a topic that's been in the news. I would argue that the issue now and why it's reaching fever pitch and getting to a point where it's boiling over and breaking is because that divide between the wealthiest and the rest is getting so great that it's causing disunity, it's causing problems within society. You read any book on economics and you'll see that when the divide between the rich and the middle class gets to a certain level, that you start to see what we're seeing now, which is a fourth turning. You see revolution, you see all the things that we're seeing. So housing affordability is one part of a broader problem. And to James's point, you can look up this on all the AI platforms. You take your pick. Their numbers vary and the stats vary depending on who's doing the study. But the top two impacts on housing prices are supply of credit. So that's monetary policy, interest rates. The Fed in America bought 2.7 trillion of mortgage-backed securities during COVID. The Australian central bank bought $350 billion worth of bonds. That kind of pressure, that kind of buying that's credit. That's putting more credit into the market. And you would argue that credit and supply are the two biggest factors that contribute to housing prices, followed then by demand, which includes immigration. And immigration is a huge problem, right? The type of immigration, the people that we're bringing in, there's an endless debate on immigration, so it is a problem. Then you got speculation, and then you got institutional buying. Institutional buying is the smallest.
Do you want me just to rattle off? I've got Simon's points here as well, just to throw them into the mix, because I think he's fairly widely respected. Is it effectively 20 million people are added to Australia since World War I, only one major new city. That's fine. But what he's saying here is prices don't rise by accident, they rise by design. 64% of Australians can vote, and of those, 75 own property. So effectively what he's saying is that property taxes make up 50 to 60% of state government revenues. So no government will willingly blow up its own balance sheet. So until you have a government change, that this is actually engineered to be the way it is, and you won't see any easing at all. In other words, the government's not going to shoot itself in the foot. Price.
and
He then goes on to say that until the younger and the COVID test, effectively, the migration fell significantly because the borders are closed, but prices still went up. So the question there, is that a lag because there's still an undersupply? Probably, who knows? But the long run migration average is 250,000 a year. So and cutting that meaningfully breaks the tax base, so it won't happen. And he goes on and on about millennials, but it's the sub 45s that are most disenchanted. And so they've got a two-party system until the boomers die out. Then you have a full change of government. Then you'll see some housing reform. Until that point in time, it is designed to be doing exactly what it's doing. And because the voter base, i.e., boomers in your house and the property owners are still alive, nothing's meaningful is going to change.
I think
his major thing, yes, immigration, but we're not off trend from immigration over the last 20 years or whatever it is. It may have spiked in the last 12 to 18 months, but even through COVID, we had no immigration. So is immigration the real thing or not? Probably not. There's a lot more at play there, and the stage is set by the two parties that are involved.
That's I think that's my gripe with the issue, right? Like it's okay that the comments were focused on immigration and beating up Bragg and whatever, but he's not inaccurate. It's estimated that of the housing prices increase, credit makes up about 30 to 50% of the reason, supply 25 to 35%, and demand or population growth 15 to 20%. So everyone is getting up in arms and talking about immigration, but that is not the biggest determinant factor of housing prices. So should we look at the biggest factors?
But I just want to add one.
I disagree in a minute.
I want to add one thing, right? And it's just very, very, very basic, right? Governments need tax, correct? That pay tax. When governments when you're not paying tax, there's problems, right, in society. Now, think about
in ours anyway. It doesn't
but think about if everyone just owned their own PPR as an example, right? So I think it's around, say, 65% to 35%, give or take. These are give or take numbers, but within 5% or so, owner occupied versus renting. Now, anyone that owns their PPR is exempt from land tax. So imagine if all those renters, right, that is exempt from land, those houses, own those houses. That means each of those houses would then be exempt from land tax. Australia last year took in about 15 billion, capital B, dollars just of land tax. Imagine the impact of that. So this is why Simon is saying, this is just one portion, but this is why Simon's saying this is designed politically. What he means by that is, when you read in between the lines, in my opinion, is things like that. And this is just one factor, $15 billion of land tax. You only pay land tax when you own multiple properties, not one property. And more, it's increasing in this country that more property will be held in less hands. So there's higher percentages of people using property. Property 40, 50 years ago was used as shelter. That's what it was used for. Today, it is not just used for shelter. It is used for an asset base for people to increase their wealth, right? And this is, in my opinion, one of the reasons why it is designed this way, because these land taxes and stamp duties are such big numbers in a very small country like Australia.
So would you say that our government is short-sighted then, because we see AI telling us the impacts of the housing affordability crisis and what happens when young people are pushed off the scale, and are pushed out of the equation? This is basically engineered to put us into a deficit with birth rates and destroy our country unless we do mass migration.
Yeah, but it's a problem. It's a problem everywhere in the world. It's not like it's specific to Australia. All Western countries are going through this exact same problem, that wages and the middle class has been hollowed out and hasn't kept up with the inflation of asset prices. This is not like an Australia specific thing. This is again, this always feeds back to the availability of credit, the amount of money in the system, because that keeps growing, and because our countries have become financialized, then it's hollowing out our middle class.
So the Western model is
it's broken.
It's broken, and what you're saying is it's broken everywhere. I mean, I think, you know, where I push back, Mark, on your thesis there is that I think a lot of that is underscored by the phrase "all things being equal," right? Like in a normal environment where there's normal levels of immigration, which we don't have at the moment, we have abnormal levels.
James just told you that we're on trend. So if you look at the last 20 years, nothing's changed. We had during COVID, we had no immigration, and then we had extra immigration that basically evened that trend. So it's not like this is a current problem.
Long term, I think you said was 250,000 a year, and it's been 500,000 a year. That's 100% increase.
That was zero during COVID, right? So all they've done is catch up on COVID. The last 2 years is not what's caused the housing affordability problem. It's easy to latch on to that and say, oh, immigration is 500,000, but house prices haven't gone up that much in the last 2 years. You would argue that versus the trend, they've actually gone up less over the last couple of years. Anyway, right? You go back and you look from 2020, when there was no immigration, house prices were up 30% a year. So there was no immigration, house prices up 30% a year.
And you still had ultra tight rental markets in as well. I mean, availability hasn't really dropped off either.
It's basic numbers, right? Like,
you're saying that the 40-year problem, Mark, but 40 years ago to buy a house, it was like 3 or 4 times an income. Now it's 13 or 14 times an income. So it's not like, by saying, oh, this is a problem that's been 40 years. Well, no, it's not actually. It wasn't the same 40 years ago. It's massively different now.
I didn't say that. You're putting words in my mouth. I said this is a problem that has unfolded over 40 years, not that it wasn't a problem.
You said we've been talking about housing affordability problems for 40 years.
We have.
But it's not the same housing affordability problem, is it?
No, housing affordability is always in the news. It's always a problem. It's gotten much worse. I'm admitting that it's at breaking point. I'm looking at the comments thinking, fuck, people are angry because they have every right to be angry. Things are fucked and they're harder than they've ever been. I just think it's unfair to blame it on just immigration. That's all.
But it's basic numbers, right? Like even if you take the immigration, and I see where people are getting upset because it's like, man, it's basic numbers. If you're bringing in, like I did some research today, and what AI was telling me is that they're going to, for 2026 on this schedule is about another 296,000 people coming in the country, right? But if you need 240,000 homes and you needed them every year for the past X amount of years, right? You're still bringing, like, it's numbers, right? So it's like what you said to Mr. Bragg. Well, if you bring in 100 and you already don't have, and you need 100 less already, 100 more already, and you're bringing in a 100 extra, that doesn't, stop the 100 and fill the 100 that's there, then start bringing in more. Like that's the basic maths, right?
And then you lose your tax base, and that's what Simon Marcus said.
You use your tax base, and you
can't pull one lever. That's the thing. That's what Mark's saying. It is multiple levers here, and you can't just rip on one.
If you want to criticize Bragg, we should criticize Bragg by saying that he wouldn't touch credit, the availability of credit, because the availability of credit is the biggest driver. How do housing prices go up 30% during COVID with no immigration? Well, the government, the central bank, the Reserve Bank of Australia bought $350 billion worth of bonds, and everyone said, "Hey, this is great. Let's get into housing." Right? Like that. They never touch that. They'll never talk about credit because that's their golden goose that you keep talking about, James.
One other thing we're not looking at, right, is how much revenue is generated through immigration. I'm doing this right now. My father-in-law wants to move here next year, and he's eligible to do so. It's going to cost about 55 grand in applications, right, to get him here. Now, I'm not sure, right? So when you start adding up, okay, 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 people a year, and you times, what an average person is costing to actually migrate to this country, like this. And this is what I think Simon means about it's designed this way. And yes, Adam, it is short-sighted. I agree, totally agree, it's short-sighted, because you can see people are now upset, right? And moving, and they're changing different, their lifestyle in different ways. They're voting with their feet and leaving the country.
Well, just to move on, we're going to see the rise of the likes of One Nation, because people are desperate for an alternative. And like Mark said, we're going to see a fourth turning. If you haven't read the book, you can read it, The Fourth Turning. You're going to see this burn it down mentality. And that's partly why I left, by the way, is because I could see that this isn't going to turn around anytime soon. And it's going to lead to massive decay and in quality of life.
We can touch on immigration maybe another time, like do an extensive episode where we discuss it. But did you guys realize that, like, we've got, I think, a population of 28 million or something like that, 26 million, 2.9 million Australians are temporary residents. 700,000 of those are from New Zealand. That's over 10% are temporary residents. And the short-sighted policy that the Australian government has is that they have adopted this policy because there's no healthcare, there's no pension attached to these people. Once their time is up, they can boot them out. And these people are the reason. These over 10% of short-term or non-permanent residents are the reason that Australia has avoided a recession for 30 years, because they inflate GDP numbers. So the short-sighted policy with relation to immigration is probably more in relation to short-term residents rather than migrants that are migrating for PR. But we can talk about that another time.
And just to round out the property then, so predictions for 2026?
We'll do that.
We'll do that at the end.
We're going to do that at the end of 2026. Look, it'd be interesting to do it now. Eric, you probably, that was probably guys, we're going to do one prediction each for 2026. But let's do a quick round table. I mean, what do you guys see for property prices in Australia in 2026? Just like rapid fire, under 60 seconds.
Yeah, the first time in a long time, I looked at a data source hotspotting, is that all major caps are looking bullish. Usually they cycle around Australia. For the first time in many years, it's basically throw the dartboard and you should be fine. Then not seeing any retract for 2026. While some will boom, some grow moderately, but they're in a weird period now. So, as I said, most major capital cities and regional markets are growing for both housing and units concurrently. So that's the take.
Yeah, inflation.
And throw on the first home owners, the exemption for LMI, cheap, or what was supposed to be cheap credit or easy credit, is just going to be fuel and matches.
Yeah, I think
anybody disagree with that?
No. First half of the inflation to the downside put less pressure on interest rates. All property prices, all capital cities will be up at least in the first half of the year. Look at Melbourne. I reckon they'll play a little bit catch up as well.
Yep.
Everybody agrees?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, very, very, very bullish. And I think a couple trends that will come into play is there's micro markets and macro markets, right? So like you look at what's happened in Sydney, and Sydney's basically has been on its knees in the new building sector. I think that will come back with the building commission and all that, which is a whole other playbook. But I think fractional ownership will be a trend that will continue to rise in this country. Multiple people owning, a slice of an asset, which is a property. But the thing is, a lot more people are looking at lifestyle and infrastructure as a buyer's interest, right? So they're going, you know what, if I'm going to buy something, I'm going to buy something that, I want to enjoy. And that's another trend I think that's going to be happening. And that's why a lot more in the luxury market with the rooftop pools and the wellness areas and all these types of things are actually a thing now. And they are actually expected in especially apartment developments now. They're doing wellness areas better than external wellness centers now in actual buildings. And I think multi-generational living will also be a major trend moving forward. Granny flats, in-law suites, because of the affordability issue. So I think the way houses will be built will change.
Yeah, and just to round that out as well, from the resources I was looking at before, usually it's the house and land, or the land market is usually the leader, but unit growth is starting to become parallel, if not better than freestanding in some of the major caps as well. So
it's not what a lot of people want to hear, but
That's an affordability thing, right?
yeah, well, it's a land thing as well, isn't it?
Another interesting fact, in around 2007, 2008, Australia was still, like, of the major Western countries, was still one of the only countries where the average house size was increasing. So up until around 2007, 2008, our house sizes were actually increasing. And then obviously since then you've seen that it's decreasing and moving towards apartments and units because, to Adam's point, the affordability is really getting out of control with relation to wages.
And you start seeing smaller, right? Like in Gold Coast, you're still getting your 105 square meter 2 beds, right? You're not a lot of apartments. Developers are building 1 beds because of the cost. You build a 1 bed, you add a bedroom, you're still building a kitchen and bathrooms and whatnot. So I think those are going to shrink. Like in Sydney, you're getting 75, 80 square meter 2 beds, and that's normal. And they come here and they go, wow, this 2 bedroom's massive. And I think in areas like Gold Coast and Brisbane, those will start shrinking as well because of the construction costs.
I just find it depressing.
Well, it's land, right? You get less for your money. That's it.
I just see the way of life, where Australia that we all grew up in, just it's gone.
Yeah.
It's over.
It'll
Kids playing in big backyards and swinging around the hills.
Yeah.
Those days are over, and I find it fucking devastating, if I'm honest with you. And this is the evil of corrupt money. It's just, don't even get this started. Anyway, let's move on and change subjects. Over the break, we saw California, and I think this is a trend that we're going to see more and more in Western countries as they continue to go bankrupt around the world. California has announced plans. I'll be voting in November on this, but they gave a deadline of December 31, 25, which just passed. Billionaires had until then to leave California. If they're still in California, the proposal will be voted on in November. If it passes, we'll see a one-time, they'll never do this again at some point in the future, trust me, bro, 5% wealth tax, where they'll take $50 million for every billion that you have, just take it out of their net worth. There's 200 billionaires in California, and a bunch of them have left. Here's the article. I'll just read a part of it really quickly. The threat of a steep wealth tax in California has reportedly prompted at least 6 billionaires, including Larry Page, Peter Thiel. Larry Page is the co-founder of Google. Peter Thiel, to cut ties with their state, and as many 20 others could be heading for the exits. The half dozen billionaires made their moves before New Year's Day, the cutoff date, to avoid the potential one-time tax of 5% on fortunes exceeding $1 billion. Anyway, people that are doing this is that are either done it or considering doing it include Chamath Palihapitiya off the All In Pod, David Sachs off the All In Pod, who actually left and moved to Texas on December 10th. Just to put this in perspective, Peter Thiel on his own, and he may be the poorest of those people on that list or one of them, he himself is worth the equivalent of 135,000 Californian taxpayers personally, right? So we're seeing this, grab for tax dollars. What do you guys think of this story in California?
I did a bit of research on it, and it's interesting that where the initiative actually came from. So the initiative actually came from the Healthcare Workers Union, right, as a ballot. And one of the reasons is there's $190 billion healthcare shortfall just in California every year. Right? So that money needs to come from somewhere. And obviously they're targeting the billionaires. But like I said before, all good, you can vote with your ballots, but these guys are going to be voting with their feet and leaving. Like it is very, very clear that no one's just going to hand over. Well, I shouldn't say no one. because there will
Jensen.
people that will stay. Jensen says he'll just pay it and stay, which is the CEO of NVIDIA.
It's probably a
but-
third arm of the government now, though, aren't they?
Yeah.
The NVIDIA.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I agree.
Soon to
Right.
be.
But what we have to realize is that, you know, the capital, removing that capital, right, isn't just money. It's influence that will leave the state of California. And what that means is family offices will leave, startups will leave, right? What happens to political donations from these people? These are all the kind of second order consequences of pissing these types of people off, in my opinion.
Yep. It's ironic, isn't it? You know, like you look at where it came from, healthcare, and I think in Australia, one of the biggest centers of fraud in Australia is our NDI system, right? And you're seeing it, you know, like I saw this article on Channel 9 last week that showed that there are more, like in certain parts of Australia now, there are more NDIS providers than cafes. In Lakemba, there is one NDIS provider for every 3 people. So,
it's ridiculous.
Holy shit.
right now, the fraud is out of control in Australia. And we're seeing it now. We're seeing it in the US where Trump's cracking down on massive childcare and healthcare fraud. So, you know, it's ironic that, you know, the vote came from healthcare, which in Australia is probably, it's a 50, you talked about Australia taking $15 billion in land tax. Well, Australian taxpayers are spending $1 billion a week on NDIS. Anyway, interesting. But the story, I mean, yeah, go ahead.
Big is a question. You go, right, you've got a billionaire tax in California. How the fuck did they get in that position? They had the biggest brains trust on the planet with San Francisco, California. LA was the hot spot. How did they get themselves in such a bind? And I have no idea about American economics.
Commie policies, bro.
They can't. I was going to say that then you got Texas is the benefit. Austin, Texas, predominantly, and Miami are the net beneficiaries. It's like wouldn't you just look at what they're doing and sort of model it instead of just destroying one of the largest populations in America, being California?
Look at the stoush between Elon and the California legislator, who's basically said Elon can F off, and Elon just responded, noted, and closed everything in California and set everything up in Texas and took, I don't know how many jobs with him. But it's an interesting one. You know, I think the world, you know, you look at the UK and you look at places like Australia. The other story I saw just recently was the ATO is starting in 2026, clipping the wings of Australian travellers. So if you owe the tax office a significant tax debt, they are stopping Australians leaving at the airport until they pay their taxes, which, you know, I think is, you know, reasonable. I mean, if you've owed the country money because you've made money there, you got to pay your bills, right? Like, I think it's reasonable, but it just speaks to the state of affairs with governments going after this revenue. In the UK, they're saying that you're liable for taxes up to 10 years after you leave as a tax resident now.
Can you imagine going to the airport with some bird you're taking skiing or something like that, and you get fucking caught at immigration, and she goes, "You're $800,000, bye."
You're late on your $1,200 GST payment.
Are you saying James, that women?
Oh no, I won't be going skiing.
What are you saying, that when they find out you have no money, that they'll leave you?
That would now be stereotypical, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Now we know why James only takes his girlfriends to the Great Barrier Reef.
It's in Australia.
But honestly, though,
like the seal Eric, it's as far as I can.
But honestly, like when these guys do leave, the bill doesn't disappear. The 190 billion doesn't disappear. So where does it shift to? It's got to come from somewhere.
Everyone
and
else.
That's the issue. This is the thing, right? It goes to everyone else. And this is what I keep saying. Increase this, increase that, but it doesn't matter because the everyday person will end up paying for it somewhere, somehow. in a tax or an increase in inflation, in shrinkflation, like the housing, right? Like you go to, I mean,
100%.
shrinkflation is a real thing. You go and buy a Snickers bar today versus a Snickers bar 20 years ago. I'm telling you, the Snickers bar is smaller. Okay. And it's the same thing what we were talking about with real estate. It's you're still getting a 2-bed apartment, but you're getting a 2-bedroom apartment that used to be 105 or 110 square meters, and now it's going to be 75 or 80. And that's just the new norm. And that's where you pay for it. That's where you pay for it.
The only real change to these things is a revolution, and that's it. Otherwise, there's nothing going to change.
And that's what Simon was saying on the most recent pod, is that the voting age of 45 and below will be that revolution, but you're 15 years out before you have a complete change of government. And the government, the party doesn't exist yet, but it will be the younger generation that'll be doing
you see like a Polish style leadership come in that's completely different politics. Or in the New York, you're seeing Mandani, who is a horrible idea, but he's risen to power on the back of just massive unrest. And what's happening there is just wild. But you're right, James, it's going to take time in Australia because Australians are still too rich.
Mark said this the whole time. We haven't had enough pain yet, or the right people haven't had enough pain yet.
And just so, like, I don't think anyone on this podcast is saying that you shouldn't have to pay tax. Like, you should have to pay tax. You definitely should. If you earn money in a country, you should have to pay tax. You know what the tax rates are, etc. But, you know, Australia, take note. We keep floating wealth taxes and super taxes, make the billionaires pay their fair share. Well, you know, you've seen countries run this experiment, and billionaires pay the movers. And
I think
the billionaires have the most mobility to move. And like Eric says, the ones that end up footing the bill is the middle class.
I think the thing that's so profoundly wrong for me on this test of the billionaire tax is its retrospective nature. Like, these are your best performing people that came to a country, came to a state, built an empire, played by the rules, and then they went, we are now just going to legislate that we're going to take it. Like, that's, whether it's $1 or $1 billion or 50 million, whatever it is, I think it's first principles wrong to just take it retrospectively from people. That is a socialist nightmare, in my opinion. Changing the rules such that billionaires get taxed going forward in some way, I think, fine, then they can make their decision. But just retrospectively taking from people, it's like that unrealized capital gains tax on super balances. It's just fundamentally wrong to go and change the rules retrospectively on hardworking small business people in Australia who worked their asses off in small businesses and invested via the super vehicle that was actually offered for that reason. Invest into this so the government doesn't have to worry about you in retirement. And people did it and used the rules, and then they went, actually, we want to take that now. I just think that's the wrong part.
You forgot the part because you were too inept to run the state properly. And
correct.
You're going bankrupt. Yep.
Yeah, let's just go and take off the people who were not inept and then just convince the masses that that's now morally right, which I think is wrong. How about get creative. I mean, there's so much resource in this country. Get creative about the future of the country. Create a sovereign wealth fund like Gerard Rennick proposed for Australia. Start some creative thinking. And for all the things you can say about Trump, if you look at it objectively from the outside, I think as a president, he represents the interests of the American people in his model. He's really trying, whether he's right or wrong on all the things, at least he's innovating, right? And you look at the UAE, they look after their people. Australia does not look after their people.
And I would go as far as saying that I think in some way it is fair to take some of that wealth from those billionaires, but not to steal it, right? Like, if Adam, if you were the mayor of California, you know, someone who's been in business, and you had all these business people in your state, wouldn't you be meeting with each of them each and every quarter and working out a way that those billionaires can invest some of their wealth into the state to make it more prosperous so that everyone can succeed? They're the kind of meetings I would be having.
Correct.
Not forcing them to leave.
Not stealing from them. Like, you think about Larry Page with $100 billion net worth or whatever he's got, you're talking about $5 billion theft. It's a lot of money.
Well, how much how much better could he do if he invested into the state, right? Like,
Exactly. Like this guy's a winner. So but Larry, how would you feel about putting $5 billion into startups that are founded in LA, right? And you can have equity in those companies, but it's a donation to create jobs. Well, it's an investment to create jobs. And then you actually multiply that money within the state rather than just give it to the fucking morons that have got you in the pickle in the first place to do more of the same.
Well, as you said, it's a one-off at the moment. Like if it's happening
At the moment.
Like, Eric said, when they run out of the 100, whatever the debt level is, they're going to try and recruit. What's the next trick?
It's a one-off at the moment, but all you got to do is piss someone off once.
Right. But who would what business person, billionaire, would invest in Anthony Albanese? I mean, the guy has gone to university and gone straight into politics, and that's the guy you're going to give your money to invest? Are you fucking kidding me? Why would a billionaire do that?
Yeah, and I've got a stat here. I don't know if you mentioned it earlier or not while we've been talking about this, Adam, but the top 1% pay nearly 50%
correct
of the California's income. So if you're pissing for a business decision, it's like, you've got 1% of people that are 90% of your revenue in your business, right? And you're going to increase your price by double for the same thing. Like, is that a good thing to do or is that a bad thing to do? You know what I mean? If they're getting the exact same thing, like with no extra value, like it's literally ridiculous when you start thinking about who, like the healthcare workers union. All I see, right, is desperation from a healthcare workers union going, we're $190 billion short year after year, right? Which I worked out 40 million people is close to $5,000 a person short on healthcare year after year. And there's no thought other than desperation.
Because the billionaires, Eric, are just going to look at that and go, yeah, you're going to take our money, you're going to fund the shortfall, and then in 5 years, you're going to be back, and we're going to be the same targets except richer again. So why would we?
And the shortfall is just going to increase, isn't it? Like it's not like it's going to get worse.
Like what Mark said, how do you get the billionaires around the table and say, how can we fix this problem for good, rather than just get you guys to pay for our incompetence? So we've got to move on with the story.
One of the big issues with it as well that I was looking to was that it affects their voting control. That some of the having to pay that amount of tax can affect their voting control within their companies. I don't know if that's true or not, but yeah, there's so much wrong.
It could do, depending on the structure, I guess, how much are they holding and all the rest. Yeah. All right, final thing, predictions for 2026, rapid fire around the table. Let's start with you, Mark. What is your prediction in your wheelhouse for 2026?
Prediction. Well, I think you're going to see, and this I think started November, December last year. I think you're going to see a continued rotation away from like the Mag 7 type equities into real hard assets, metals. I mean, they're going crazy. I think you're going to continue to see that. There's definitely a big rotation of money underway at the moment. So I think they continue to look bullish, although I do think that we are going to have a 15 to 20% market correction at some stage through the year, probably Q2, Q3, and that'll be a dip worth buying.
Giant. So in short, Mark, your predictions are metals are going to
metals and companies that own hard assets, things like that, companies that are doing real things. I think some of these companies that have been priced based on hype. Hype. They might be down 50 to 70% when we get this correction. So I would be careful with what you own. Everything looks good at the moment. Doesn't look like there's any. I mean, look at everything that's happened in the last week, and the market is still chugging along. But I definitely think it's going to be a year of volatility. So,
and also with that correction, Mark, like last, you're talking about in the US predominantly to start, and then they sneeze, we get a cold type of arrangement. Like,
I think a lot of markets. a lot of markets correlate to one when you get these corrections. So, gold, stocks, the indices, they all kind of sell off at the same time.
I was sort of more about the perpetrator. I was doing a bit of research back into if you believe in the 18-year property cycle, 18.6-year property cycle. Last time was a housing-led GFC. And from what I'm listing at the moment, it's going to be, there's just another catalyst. In other words, this time's not new. It's just going to be different, led by something. Is an AI bubble that triggers the pullback. What's it going to be that pulls the needle?
Yeah, it's like with AI. Like, I don't think AI is in a bubble, but a lot of these companies that have been priced based on the hype, they're probably going to get a nasty correction, and then the value is going to accrue to the companies that are using AI to basically increase their profits double digits per year, right? You're seeing, for the first time in a long time, productivity numbers in the US went up without any new employment, right? So usually you need new employment goes up with increase in productivity, but now it's going up without any new employment. So I think you're going to see some of that value that accrued to some of maybe the chip companies and whatnot accrued to the other companies that are benefiting from.
So I've put a voice block the prediction property, all directions leading one way, and specifically Southeast Queensland will be a major beneficiary of it, and the sector that's probably going to be the most solid or resilient will be the affordable housing sector, I think. So that's where I'm looking.
Eric.
Yeah, same. Obviously, very bullish on property, specifically Gold Coast, Brisbane, based on the Olympics. They're going to start, and they haven't started a lot of the infrastructure construction. They're starting that in 2026, 2027 for the Olympics, which in my opinion, they're going to be sucking a lot of labor out of the construction market, which is going to put more pressure on construction, which is already a big issue here, which in relation will be less things will be built if the demand stays where it is. We'll see some half decent growth. Business wise, I really think people need to start looking at AI a lot more than just ChatGPT and Gemini and asking it questions and prepping for a pod like we do as an example, and use it in prepping for business meetings and bits and pieces, looking at it on how you become more efficient. As I discussed in our chats earlier, we sat down with Oliver Merrick, that young guy that you mentioned on the pod a couple months back, and he's starting to work with us, basically just looking at systems and processes and what we're doing in behind the scenes and how we can be more efficient. And that's what I mean, like getting these people in and saying, this is what I've been doing, right? Or dinosaurs, we've been doing this for 20 years. How can we actually become more efficient? And I think people need to start thinking of it as less taboo, and it's here to stay. It's coming quick. And I agree with what you guys were saying in the podcast last time about the adoption. I after thinking about it, thinking that how long it took for the adoption of phones and whatnot and internet, this will be a lot quicker, definitely. So those are kind of my couple predictions. And I'm with Mark. I think, the golds and the silvers will continue because the masses follow, the sheep follow what the sheep do. And that's what they're doing. Where right now, what you should be doing, in my opinion, is buy things when they're down, just like some of the receipts that you posted a couple days ago. So that's me.
Okay, I got two. I think it's one. I think we are not I don't think we've seen the end of the bull run for crypto. People might think we have. I think we're going to see a rally this year at some point. I'll leave that there. I'm not going to do price predictions, but I think it's going to get stronger. But I think this year, one of the defining stories globally is going to be full self-driving. I think FSD is going to be the year that FSD started its rollout of unsupervised driving. And I think the world is going to start waking up to the enormous impact of just that one piece of the Tesla empire. I think it's going to be really profound when that starts rolling out at scale. We're in such an interesting time. I think the hype around the singularity arriving is a little bit overblown because From an AI point of view, we'll get there, but from a robotics point of view, there's quite a lot of real world physics and challenges that are to be overcome. But I think that, and regulatory things, but I think FSD is going to be a real thing this year. We're going to see it roll out in the US first at scale. It's already rolling out in Australia. I've got friends who've got the latest Tesla and are just absolutely blown away by being able to get in their car and just fully self-drive now. So I think that's going to be a really interesting thing to watch. And I think there's going to be, an adjustment in the people's understanding, maybe not in the share price, but at least in their understanding of the lead that Tesla has in that regard over someone, say, for example, like BYD or whatever. So I think it's going to be a really interesting year from that point of view. And AI, like you said, Eric, I think the convergence of 4 things are sort of on our doorstep right now. One is the massive improvement in AI. Like I think back 2 years, how far just video has come. Like it's wild. It's got to the point now on Instagram where I see stories and reels, and half the time I don't even know whether it's real or not. So I just flick by. My trust in what I'm seeing is plummeting. When I saw a clip this morning of Fed Chair Powell talking about, what's happening with his Department of Justice. I don't even know if it's real or whether it's just a hygiene video.
It was,
right?
but it didn't look it.
It didn't look real.
I was like, this isn't even real. But it
I
was
saw
real.
another story. A good friend of mine in the Bitcoin world sent me saying, some prominent banking executive saying, I've just come from a secret meeting in Geneva and this is what was discussed. And this guy's not an idiot. He sent it to me and I went straight to Grok and said, is this real? And they said, no, this is a fake video on AI. And I'm like, I think we're going to see a change. People's engagement with social media, they're going to have to do something, because half the time now I literally just flick past and go, I don't even know if this is real, and I don't care to go and do the effort to find out if it's real. So I think that's going to be, I don't know where that's going to go, but I think the trust in social media is going to fall dramatically, and there's going to be a rise in authenticity. I don't know what's going to happen, but something's going to have to change there at a platform level perhaps, because it's just becoming, and we're going to see it accelerate like this, where AI is going to be producing far more content than real creators. And so I think that's going to be an interesting thing to watch as well.
Funny you say that about the AI and videos, because like as crazy it is, some of them are quite funny. And James sent me one this morning of Donald Trump, and he's sitting there for about 10-15 seconds, and it literally looks like him, the way he's obviously not the way he's talking, but he's like, yeah, I stole that shit. That's my oil. That's my, but like, you look at it and it's so amusing, right? But you're like, man, it looks so real. Obviously it's not his voice, but so much fake shit. And I think one of the things that a lot of people are talking about, obviously with influence moving forward, will be, in-room community style catch-ups, events, real time, face-to-face, because eventually we're not going to know what is anymore on our mobile. So it'll be interesting.
It's just scary. Scary when you think. Go ahead, James.
Out of the four of us who took a break over the from social over the Christmas period, like I think I logged into Instagram 3 times. Facebook, I don't even look at it anymore, and just put the phone down and didn't miss a thing. Basically, it was just a nice little digital detox. But like you, Adam, like at the end of the day now, I'll have a scroll and go, fuck this, I could be bothered, and just go watch something more legit on YouTube if I'm gonna have a break. But social, just too much.
One I didn't put it down as much as I should have. On social media side of things, that's
He was
for
too busy filming his new house.
but one of the other reasons is, and one of the other predictions I have in 2026 and moving forward, and this isn't rocket science predictions, but personal brand is going to be a thing that's going to be keep building. And I just want to put it out there to make us accountable that Mark and I have hired a personal branding coach last week, and we're really doubling down on what we're going to be doing. And
we're on our
holding each other accountable to really start building out our personal brand this year, which has been inspired by a lot of people. Obviously, Adam, you've been one of those guys that has been building over the last for years, but the last couple of years really heavily. And yeah, so it's I think it's very, very important that anyone in business start getting out there and telling your story a little bit, but be genuine, be yourself. Don't have this double persona of I'm one person on on social media and totally different person in real life. People want the true raw person that you are. So.
On that, just to close this up, I thought I'd share something in that regard. I really, over the break, took time to reassess my relationship with social media, and I haven't been very active at all since Christmas. And one thing I did was I took 90 videos out of my Instagram, many of the top performing videos in terms of reels that were bringing me dozens and dozens of new followers a day. I took down a lot of the Tommy Robinson stuff. I took down a lot of the anti-extreme Islam stuff, not because I vehemently despise extreme Islamist beliefs, not because I no longer despise them. I do. I think it's a cancer on the world, but just because the type of followers that was bringing me, and most importantly, the impact on my mental health from the comments and it was creating growth, but the kind of growth that's akin to cancer, as opposed to growth that's akin to having a better life. So my Instagram growth just stalled at 106,000, whereas normally I'd probably be at 110, 115,000 by now had I left those 90 high-performing videos up that get hundreds and hundreds of views a day. And I just made a conscious decision. I just don't want to talk about it anymore. I believe it's baked into the system, like you guys said. There's nothing I can do about it. All I can do is maybe help a little bit with the revolution doing the podcast, seeing Pauline, for example, rise in power. Maybe it's just helping the revolution fast, whether it's the right solution, the wrong solution. But I'm just optimizing for peace this year and not for drama. And
you know what, even with the small following that I have, like the amount of messages I get, so I can imagine the amount of messages you get, and the people, like I had people come in here yesterday at 5 o'clock after the meetings that we had. They're followers of ours, wealthy, the dad's a very wealthy commercial developer. He was watching the pod. And then the son walked in going, well, he's been watching the pod 6 months. Who are these guys? He goes, oh, I watch them every week. I like what they're doing, and then next thing you know, the son gets on it, and the son's a raving fan. So they wanted to come in and check the studio and come meet. And then I'm at Bunnings down the cleaning aisle, grabbing some stuff. And this guy double takes. I'm wearing my hat. Oh, Eric, Unemployable. Love what you guys doing. He's a 60-year-old, big concreting business out of Sydney. Just loves what we're doing, and it goes to show you the impact that you can have in a positive way. And that's where I know we're having that impact. Like there's things that we have to talk about from time to time that isn't positive and it is negative, and it does attract a lot more attention. But I think it's we need to keep continuing educating the person on both sides, but overall bringing more of a positive impact to people on how we can help change their lives, just like we're in the trenches trying to do the same in ours.
There's one more prediction that we should probably go around the table and make. What will our YouTube subscriber count be at the end of 2026?
That because you got it so right this year?
No, I didn't. I was out by six. I was out by the most. I said 100,000 and it was 40, so I was out by 60,000. Yeah. But I was the most optimistic.
Where are we now? We're at 40,000.
We're almost 40. We'll crack 40 in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think when I look at the data from last year, which I presented to the guys, a huge amount of our growth came from a very small amount of interviews, right? So Pauline Hanson, Tommy Robinson, and a couple of others brought in a huge amount of our sub growth. So I think if we continue to bring on polarizing people, that's what works on YouTube. The algorithms and the incentives are such that you need people that are going to poke people one way or the other. So if we want to be boring, I predict our growth will be 50,000 by the end of the year. But if we want to agitate, I predict our growth will probably be maybe 100,000 by the end of the year. You know, given that we grew from 5 to 40,000, which is a 7x in a year, I think a doubling is kind of reasonable at this point. But it depends how much we want to agitate and piss people off.
And just on that last piece there, just for anyone who's listening, that Mark and Eric have doubled down on a personal brand. Is it primarily an Instagram profile you're building, or is it going to be multi-platform? What's the latest trend moving into 2026? So we can have a prediction on that for anyone who's looking to grow a personal brand.
I think the lens that we're taking for the capturing of the content will be something that's conducive to Instagram, because it'll be a lot of video style stuff. But I think that the underpriced attention is probably X. So I'd really like to repurpose my stuff for X as well. But I also want to pick up my my podcast. I don't think it'll be branded as the same name that it was, and it won't just focus on markets. But I'd like to do a more documenting. You know, we've got a couple of new business opportunities and some double downing on the pod and the brand. So I'd like to document that journey and rebrand my personal YouTube channel as well.
I think it depends on the type of content or the type of people that you want to attract as well. Like the Facebook demographic is very different than Instagram, as an example, which is very different than TikTok. I don't have a TikTok account, right? So that's something I'm going to have to think about. Do I want to go and open up that rabbit hole of having TikTok on my phone and another rabbit hole of me going on there? One thing is posting on a platform. The other thing is how much of your attention does it take when you start going down the rabbit holes as well. So I think like LinkedIn is great as well, you know, depending on what type of business that you're in. So it's just, I guess you got to just really look at the demographic. For now, for me, the majority of it will be Instagram, just because that's probably the channel that I'm using the most myself personally. Yeah, but we'll see how we go.
I think my advice to anybody who's thinking about, sorry about the banging, because we've got a building site right across the road here in Uluwatu. We've got a Javanese building crew banging on a retainable. My advice to anybody thinking about personal brand is there's sort of two sides to this. You can sort of approach it as, where's all the eyeballs, where's the audience? And the other way to look at it is the qualitative side against your strengths and weaknesses. So some people are just really, really good on video. Some people just hate the idea of being on video or being photos, right? So you've got to be able to express yourself in a place that suits your strengths, or you have to be prepared to do the work to get better in those areas that don't. And then you have to really think through how you're going to, what parameters you're going to put around it. Like Seth Godin refuses to go on social media because he just refuses to expose himself to the negativity that comes with comments and, you know, all the rest that comes with it. So you really just got to be strategic about what are your strengths, how do you best express yourself, and how deep. Like this year for me is the year of just of blocking people. When I get people that just say shit to me, I don't respond now. I'm just blocking them. Get off my following. Fuck off. Go away. And I'm doing that more and more and more. I'm getting in less fights. I'm just blocking. And you know, you have to have really strong boundaries around it and choose the platform that best suits you, because ultimately that's where you'll do best, in my opinion. Instagram for me is just very natural and easy, but for some people, you know, it's not natural and easy. And yes, it'd be really good because it's text, you know.
Yeah. And I think one thing that you need to learn as well, which I'm learning, is you need to value yourself. So you're not going to be able to catch up with everyone, because everyone wants to catch up. Everyone wants your mobile number. Everyone wants an email. Everyone just wants your attention, and that's worth something. And I've been battling that, going, you know, where's the line in the sand that I draw to go, hey, if you actually want that chat, go to my Connect, or if you want that chat, this is what it's going to cost. That's what I'm battling with at the moment.
Because I can only imagine on a following 100,000, Adam, when you said when you put up the previous stuff, we call it bait rage, call it whatever you like. The amount of inbox must be incredible. Like I don't use social much at all, and just even looking at the inbox in there and seeing 10 messages from people, like it's just another inbox.
I get 1 to 200 a day, DMs. So that's not,
Wow.
1 to 200 a day. And so, and then people some of them are abusing you. Some of them just want to pick your brain. So it's a lot. And so it gets at around that 100,000. I caught up with Matt Cameron the other day here in Bali, and we both said, once you get to that 100,000, it just changes to the point where you can't keep up with everything. The best you can do is just like the response. That's it. You can't respond anymore. To get to 100,000, I responded to nearly every DM I ever got, literally. But now it changes where you just can't. But anyway, it's an interesting world. For me, I'm really just thinking about what do I really want to talk about, if anything, with the world. And at the moment, I don't have an answer. Maybe a bit of Bitcoin, but even that I don't really want to do anymore because of all the wrench tax and all the shit that's happening. There's one here in Bali recently where a Ukrainian guy got taken on the street by a Russian gang in Bali. And, they took a sizable sum of money. So I don't even know that I want to do that anymore going forward, because it's just, the world's going crazy, and whether I just want to shut the fuck up and enjoy my life and not engage with the general populace anymore going forward is a real thought that I'm having at the moment. So we'll just see. Or just doing content that I actually really enjoy doing. I really enjoy doing some of their content where I'm just having a long form, slow chat with people about their life and like decisions that they've made, but not around business and not around wealth, but just around, like when I spoke to Janine Howard or spoke to the couple that moved to Thailand, I really enjoyed those conversations of hearing people who've chosen a different plan for their life, and the nuanced discussion around that's interesting to me. So I'm just sort of playing with that, like, what do I want to talk about? Where do I want to talk about it? And
also probably the amount of effort that goes into it as well. I remember when you did the series, when you did Hedge of Cyprus, like where's Adam? They were great and they were engaging, but I can only imagine they took a hell of a lot of work to punch out a video a week.
Yeah, and I took them all down because of my divorce, and my ex was all through them, so I just took them offline.
What about Adam? What about like one thing that I always love, and the reason I kind of wanted to get into this in the first place was just to connect with different groups and types of people. At what point do you think Unemployable is at the level where we can start getting some really, really well-known name guests, where we can, sit down for an hour or two like Joe Rogan does and have a conversation with, these really, really renowned guests? Is there a way, or at what point can we start a concerted effort to kind of go over after some international guests and get them on the panel like PBD does and things like that? Because I would really love to see the evolution of the channel go in that direction. But at what point, we have to keep grinding till then, but at what point does that open up as a possibility?
I think for domestically in Australia, I think you need to be a minimum of 100 to 200,000 subs, real subs in Australia. Internationally, I think you've got to be north of 500,000 to really start getting those types of guests, in my opinion. In Australia, a YouTube channel with 100,000 subs is a big channel if they're real, and there's some bullshitters in Australia, but if it's a real, genuine 100,000, it starts to become a meaningful audience. What's interesting is Spotify is actually now making us as much money almost as YouTube pays us in ad revenue. Yeah.
In a very short period of time.
In a very short period of time. We've only really done that in like 6 months, whereas we've been on YouTube for 2 years. So Spotify's really loving us. And I think the reason is because we're consistent and we're increasing. So we're constantly putting out content. At the same time, the audience is now conditioned. So I think there's some real interest there. But what I think, to answer your question, Mark, these are the sort of strategic questions. You've got to pay the price. Like, if you look at PBD, he's blown up when he did his political channel. I like politics sort of, but I also hate it. I hate that it leads to fights. It doesn't bring me peace and joy, right? Like, so I'm in this conflicted place of like, I don't want to beat up on premiers and all this stuff. And yeah. So anyway.
Yeah.
But I think your personal brand, Eric, I think what I would be thinking about is, like, what do you really, really want to talk about? Like, what do you really love to talk about? Because the one thing is for sure with social media is that you have to be consistent and you have to be in it for the long term. And the people that I see that have done the best have a very narrow, simple focus. Like you look at Two Worlds Collide, it's outrage Australian life. You look at Big Chocky, it's daily outrage. You look at, and I don't want to live that world, but he's been successful doing that. You look at Matt Cameron, it's move to Bali, leave Australia, Australian real estate fucked, Bali real estate's great, move to Bali, and buy my villas. And he's done really well, you know, like he's blown up, and he's just sold out his latest project in 3.5 months off Instagram with no marketing, like completely sold from Instagram, no agents at all, which is crazy, right? Like, and he started on Instagram a year ago and now he has this marketing tool for his business, which is great. And he's building great stuff and everybody's winning. So I think the narrow focus about a thing that you're passionate about is the solution.
Adam,
what I've done, I'm too broad and it's not great what I've done.
Adam, you and James know about the business that Eric and I are going to be starting. Do you think that would be a good angle, and that kind of angle has legs? Talking about that adventure.
Yeah, I do. Just consistent, authentic. You just got to love what you're doing and be happy to talk about it and engage with your audience and go for it. But don't be too broad. That's my advice. All right, guys, let's bring this one to a close. Hopefully that was helpful for our listeners at home. We are back in 2026 and we will be back next Friday. One change we're making just for the audience, so you know, we are going to be recording now. It's Tuesday today and we release on Friday. That's what we've been doing up until now. We're going to change that where we record on Thursday and release on Friday. And the reason we're doing it is so that we can be the most up-to-date possible in the world we live in. Tuesday to Friday, a lot can happen. So we're going to try and just make it a little bit newer. Who knows who's going to be invaded next?
Countries are changing hand in that time.
All right, guys, let's get into it for 2026. Welcome back to the show, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now. Hey there. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Unemployable. If you'd like to watch another episode, just click there.